Hello YouTube, this is Thongger and today I'm bringing you something new. This is my top 10 tips I can think of to help new players. So top 10 tips on newbies, that's what this video will be called. Anyway, my first tip of the game is learn hotkeys. So I'm just gonna show you some examples. I think the most important hotkey is actually the hotkey for your base. So say I'm fighting somewhere out here or doing whatnot doodads, instead of having to go all the way back to my base or to click this little headquarters button all the way in my corner over here, I can just press F1 instead. And say I want to build my first squad, let it be assaults, space marines or scouts. I just press S to build my normal regular tactical space marines and C to build my regular scouts. So that is my first tip I can think of, and I'll show you another tip where hotkeys are just as important. Alright, another important use of hotkeys. Say my scouts are running into a bunch of orcs over here, and these orcs are no doubt gonna jump into melee right with my scouts over here. So rather than having to click on V over here, which will get my scouts killed, I just press V and boom, I hit these guys with shotgun blast. So that's an importance of hotkeys. If I had to do that, my scouts would have died much earlier. And of course you always want to retreat. You don't want to retreat too late like that, which results in your scout squad getting killed, but I'll get to that point later. Alright, my top second tip I can think of is power generators or power nodes. They have the lightning symbol over them. It's always very important to cap power nodes and to attack and defend your power nodes. So I'm going to show you the basics of how Space Marine should attack power nodes and why it is important to defend your power nodes. So whenever you have a free shot to attack enemy power generators, you want to take it, and with Space Marines the best way of taking out power generators, the best way for most factions actually is to use a flamer. For Chaos it would be Noise Marines or Plague Champions, Bile Spewer. For Eldar it would be Banshees, and for pretty much everyone else it would be Flamers. So you always want to take an opportunity to wreck your opponent's generators as much as possible, as each generator costs 100 requisition apiece and will really damage their economies. So destroying generators is just as important as building up your own generators. But saying that, you want to protect your own generators as well. In this game I had chosen to destroy my opponent's generators, but I had abandoned my own generators as well. So now my opponent's Banshees have a free shot at my power generators while my Marines are miles away over here. So yeah, so this is just goes to show how important it is to wreck generators. And this brings me on to my next point. You do need detector units to face enemy snipers like this. The Space Marine Scout Sergeant is a detector unit, and this allows him to spot rangers and snipers and Ravener Alpha and other stealthy units like cloaked Zinch Chaos units. So without my Scout Sergeants, they had been forced away. Now I have no way of returning fire to these rangers, and they can pretty much just snipe at my Space Marines with impunity. So the most I can do is just try and wander around quite blindly, but they pretty much have a free shot at my Space Marines. So that just goes to show how important it is to have detectors if there are infiltrated enemy units on the field. Okay, so this next part brings me to tip 4, the use of cover and staggered weapons teams. So as you can see here, Phoenix is a bit on the defensive. I am pushing forward with a Chimera and some Guardsman squads, and you always want to make use of cover whenever possible. So when you have this yellow highlight above your units, that means your unit is in sort of like average or mediocre cover. So they'll take slightly reduced damage from incoming range fire from the opposite side. So if my Chimera is firing on these Guardians at the moment, these Guardians will take less damage. Medium cover generally tends to be small cover like craters or like benches, soft cover like trees and foliage, and hard cover like this green icon here over your units means that heavy cover, and that can either be in the form of an Eldar energy shield which protects perfect cover, or where is it? Let me find an example. No example of unit in heavy cover. Anyway, a unit in heavy cover tends to be around object like hard metal objects like these dragon's teeth over here, these little obstacles, or like behind walls and solid stone walls and whatnot. So those tend to be heavy cover items, or some large boulders. It sort of depends. You have to know the maps well. But a lot of this cover can be destroyed, but as little explosions take place across the map, they will provide new cover to appear. So anyway, yeah, so onto staggered weapons teams. Phoenix has set up 2 weapons teams over here. He has his first Shuriken's weapons platform here, and he has a Bright Lance weapon team here, out of my line of sight. Let's just look at my line of sight over here. I cannot see. I can only see this at the moment. So I think it's like, oh, it's no problem. My Chimera can wander right through it. So I'm gonna just wander my Chimera through it. But slowly, Shuriken's, the Bright Lance suddenly opens fire. So it does catch my Chimera in an ambush. So my Chimera rapidly has to retreat. So I almost lose my Chimera there because Phoenix decided to bait it with his Bright Lance weapons, using his Shuriken and his Bright Lance weapon team in the staggered platform. If he put them in a straight line, I would have been able to drive right through the middle and drop my guardsmen behind them to slaughter those weapons teams. So continuing on from tip 4, so this is an excellent use of cover and fortifying an area. Using energy shields and staggered weapons platforms, you can really lock down an area, and to pretty much charge a formation like this from the front would be essentially suicide. As I did lose my Chimera earlier, so trying to breach this from the front. So you never want to attack fortified locations like this, and whenever you have a fortified location like this, you want to sort of hold it. But saying that, you don't want to turtle, because that lets your opponents build up and gain momentum and sort of find the initiative of getting around it. So here in this game, I'm in a bit of a pickle, as Phoenix has a larger army than me, and I only have 2 squads of guardsmen, a Lehman Russ tank and an Inquisitor and whatnot. And I'm gonna be hard pressed to try and breach this huge Elder army from the front. So this comes on to tip number 5. So tip number 5 is scouting and flanking. So you always want to scout ahead of your main army before you fully commit your forces to the fray. So here, using the Inquisitor's Interrogator armor, which allows me to cloak any unit, but pretty much all races have a cloaked unit. Like Orcs have Commandos, Tyranids have their Raveners, Imperial Guard have this, or Stormtroopers, Elder have Rangers. So I know that this Phoenix has this hugely fortified location over here, so this brings me to the next point, flanking. So let's just have a look here. I have 1 primary force. I have a couple of troops over here. My Inquisitor and my Catachans are just hanging out here. It would be suicide for them to attempt a frontal assault on this heavily fortified group of Elder behind the energy shields and having weapons platforms and whatnot. But I do know they are waiting there for me, but Phoenix does not know I'm coming from until I walk past here into his line of sight. So this is an example of flanking. So now what was now my flanking force has become my main force, and my initial force has become my flanking force. So I'm just going to divert enemy fire and distract Phoenix here while I push forward with my Lehman Russ, and his Guardians are all bunched up behind the energy shields, and the energy shields will do nothing if they are fired from on the opposite direction. Cover will only protect you from the direction when the opposite direction is facing. If the enemy is behind your cover, cover is useless. So here Phoenix is trying to retreat, but I'm just going to force melee and try to cause as much casualties as I can, bringing down a few extra Guardians. So that was an example of flanking right there. Continuing on from tip number 5, flanking. Sometimes you may not have the chance to flank if you have slow ponderous units like Space Marines. Space Marines aren't cowards, and they are the manliest men out there, so there's no point in flanking if you have Assault Space Marines. So with Assault Space Marines, you either want to jump on clumped enemy units, like I could jump on 2 targets, these 2 squads of guardsmen here, or this weapons team, but this weapons team is back here providing cover for the guardsmen, so I will jump on them instead. So as you can see here, I'm just gonna jump my Assault Space Marines onto this vulnerable weapons team over here and start tearing them in the with my chainsaws, forcing them to retreat. Alright, here, and this is another way of getting around weapons teams. Like here, my entire army is suppressed by an Imperial Guard's weapons teams over here. So what I'm gonna do is to infiltrate my scouts, and my scouts do have a grenade. So now my scouts are infiltrated, and I do hold a grenade in at this weapons team, and boom, the weapons team really gets hammered, losing 3 out of 4 members. So that's just one way you can use of getting around enemy weapons teams if you are suppressed and unable to flank them at that moment. Alright, tip number 6. Grenade spiking. You always want to grenade spike enemy squads whenever possible, and if the enemy squad is retreating, that is the best time to actually use a grenade spike. Retreating squads take double melee damage and double damage from grenades and explosives and whatnot, and they take reduced damage from missile fire. So this is going to be an example of grenade spiking. It's not a perfect example, but it's good enough in my opinion. So here I see my opponent is retreating his Guardians. His Guardians will run in a straight line back to his base, so they're pretty much going to run along the path of my mouse over here. So I'm going to intercept his retreating guardians with a grenade from my scouts over here. I've upgraded my scouts with the scout sergeant, so as you can see, I'm going to intercept his guys, throw a grenade well into the retreating path, and boom. So that knocked out 4 out of the 5 guardians. So you really want to do those just to continue to wreck your opponent's army whenever possible. Now this takes me to tip number 7, which is force meleeing. Force meleeing is done with the button Z or Z, and this pretty much forces a ranged unit or any unit to jump into melee and start stabbing the enemy with their fists, bayonets, feet, headbutts, teeth, claws, whatnot have you, at whatever weapon is at the disposal. So sometimes it will be useful to force melee, especially like say I have these guardsmen. They would definitely lose in a firefight with a weapons platform. So what I've done here is actually, if you get the chance, just force melee with a weapons platform, as with my guardsmen chasing after this weapons platform, trying to stab it with their bayonets. The weapons platform won't have a chance to deploy. So here Phoenix is trying to redeploy his weapons platform. My guardsmen just keep hounding after him, trying to stab it with their bayonets. So this is one useful tactic you have of immobilizing weapons teams. So that guardsman was just trying to stab away with his bayonet. So here Phoenix knew he was in a bit of trouble and he didn't want to take any losses. Here's another example of splitting up your units to deal with weapons teams. As you can see here, I do have 2 squads of guardsmen. They are pinned and suppressed by Phoenix's weapons team over here, and Phoenix is sending his banshees in under the cover of his shuriken weapons platform against my pinned and suppressed guardsmen, as they cannot return fire and are going to be in some serious trouble. But here I have some infiltrated Catachans using the Interrogator's armor ability. Very good use of war gear. With war gear you always want to sort of find a balance between getting the correct amount of war gear. If you get too much war gear, you can't tech. If you can't tech, then you get screwed when your opponent pulls out an early vehicle rush. So you always want to go for war gear, but not too much war gear. It's a very fine art. There's no rule that's set in stone. It always depends on the situation, whether you want to go for war gear or you want to tech, you want to get more units with more upgrades and yada 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 yada. So anyway, here this is going to be an example of how I get my troops out of trouble using force melee with my Catachan Devils. So I split them up from the main body, and they are going to dive in here, and I'm going to force melee and jump in with my Catachan Devils over here, but they are starting to get slashed by the Banshees. So let's have a look at the health bar over here. So they were really low on hit points, so I retreated on out of there. So, and Phoenix's troops are getting a bit of trouble, so once again retreating just before you take too much losses. When units get around this much hit points and you know they're in trouble, no point leaving your guys in there just to take losses. Best just to retreat them straight away. And now we come to point number 8, which is reinforcing and all the things to do with reinforcing. Generally, your troops can only reinforce back at the base, but you also can reinforce your troops from transports like Chimeras, Razorbacks, Orc war trucks, and Falcon grav tanks. So these transports, not only are they a mobile weapons platform, they also serve to act as a mobile base. So not only do they let your troops get around a little bit faster, they also allow your troops to reinforce on the field. So with guardsmen, this really allows you to have a lot of staying power on the field. And say you're playing a Space Marine Apothecary, being able to reinforce on the field and your Apothecary being there to heal your troops gives you like a permanent base. So you have to spend less downtime retreating your squads back, having to walk back to the front. All in all, giving your opponent more time to destroy your generators or cap victory points and whatnot have you. So on a side note, you can't see this here, but next to on the reinforce button, which is usually around here on my screen, if say your squad is taking casualties, like this guardsman squad is down to 11 men out of 12, if you right click the plus reinforce button, it goes in auto reinforce. So sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. If it's in the middle of a battlefield and my guardsmen are getting shredded to bits, I want that on so my guardsmen can continuously churn out of a Chimera like an endless stream of bodies. But if I'm back at base and I really need resources to build a tank or a dreadnought, but I'm wasting all my resources on auto reinforce, that's bad. So you also want to be quite aware of what units on auto reinforce and what unit isn't. There are times when it will work and there are times when it won't. So just a little pointer for you guys to have out there. Anyway, here's another use of transports. Phoenix does have a weapons team over here, and normally a weapons team would go to shred my infantry, but now he has no counter to my Chimera, and this keeps my guardsmen nice and safe, and now my guardsmen can come piling out, all safe and sound, and do what they want to these poor little Eldar. So that was the use of a grenade burst over there, just to try and hammer these retreating Eldar troops just a little bit more, trying to cause what little damage I can. Alright, for tip number 9, it is on war gear and upgrades. You need to find a balance between upgrading your heroes and your squads and teching and building units and whatnot. I've seen people lose games because they have spent all their power and all their requisition on decking out their hero with war gear in tier 1. That doesn't work. But saying that, some heroes need war gear to operate efficiently, so you need to find a balance between upgrading your squads and your heroes and having enough power left to tech. It's a really fine balance. I can't really think of an example to show you, but you just need to find that niche. Usually I would only spend about 30 power max on war gear. For Space Marines, I wouldn't even get war gear in the first round. For Imperial Guard, I'd maybe spend about 20 to 30 power tops in tier 1, and I try to usually spend about max 50 power in my tier 1 game, and I save the rest of my power for teching, because once you spend too much power, then you are sort of entering the realm where you're lagging in the tier 1 race, in the technology race. You may have a really strong tier 1 game, but nothing in your tier 1 arsenal is going to counter a Blood Crusher or a Chimera that comes storming down your flank or down your front lines. There's precious little you're going to be able to do against that, regardless of all the war gear you get. So you need to find that balance, so hope that helps. So now this brings me on to my last point, tip number 10, if I am going numerically correctly. Vehicles are much more vulnerable when fired on their rear armor. So from the frontal armor, they're quite resilient to most amounts of fire. Once you present the rear armor, even conventional weapons like heavy bolters and whatnot will really start to lay the hurt down on vehicles. So weapons that would otherwise be ineffective against them on the front will cause a significant amount of damage if these vehicles actually struck on the rear. So I'll show you a few more examples of how to take advantage of this and how to use this knowledge to your advantage. Continuing on from tip 10, rear armor strikes, I'm going to show you a way of it's not a fixed set in stone way, but it's a helpful way of destroying enemy vehicles like Chimeras, which are very pesky. Most of the time they can roll away from danger pretty quickly unless they drive headlong into it. But I do have a tank hunting team over here. I have a tactical marine squad armed with a missile launcher over here, and they're not very fast and they trundle along quite slowly, as Space Marines aren't very fast. They're very slow moving, tough guys. But I'm going to use my Librarian's abilities here along with Space Marine Assault Space Marine Melter Bombs to successfully destroy a Chimera that otherwise would have escaped from my Marines. So let's just show you this point. This Chimera is busy destroying my gen farm. Another important point, just how important transports are and allowing your troops to roll around on the battlefield in a mobile manner. So here I see this Chimera. I'm going to jump my Assault Space Marines in, and I'm going to hurl a melter bomb into his rear armor. You always want to try and target his rear armor with any sort of melter bombs or grenades, as they tend to take double damage on the rear, and the melter bombs do have a snaring effect. So when this melter bomb goes off, the vehicle is slowed. My Space Marines do get a missile off on this vehicle, and I do have Veil on time cast on these Space Marines, so this allows them to move extremely fast, much faster than they normally would. And this Chimera has his rear armor presented, is slowed by the melter bomb, and I hope you can hear me on this. So I do fire one missile launcher off, and this destroys the Chimera once and for all. And for a little added bonus, boom! Watch that Force Commander just kill that dozens of guardsmen with his Thunder Strike Hammer. How awesome is that? I wish I could do that. Anyway, that's pretty much all I can think of. I hope you guys enjoyed this 10-part top 10 tip series on how to play Dawn of War 2 Retribution. I'm not the best player, like I said, time and time again, but I hope this was helpful and will help the newer players. So if you have any requests, just let me know and I'll do my best to accommodate your requests. Thongger out.